Hi, this is Eric Durek, and welcome to this very special edition of Med Health Fit, the TV show that integrates wellness and healthcare. And tonight, you see, we have a different format because we have two guests. On my left is Dr. Hesu Witten from the Witten Method in Montecito, California. Welcome, Hesu. And on my right, Dr. Crystal Galavan from Crystal Chiropractic in Goleta. So you guys are kind of wedged in between Santa Barbara here, one to the west and one to the east. And tonight we're going to be talking about a couple interesting issues that are intertwining. The first is the application of chiropractics into primary care in the United States. It's a big topic, but we're going to kind of drill down into it. And as part of that, we're going to be talking about how chiropractors can be a force of nature in terms of how they deal with what I'll call the vaccine freedom issue. I don't even like to call it the anti-vax movement. I like to call it the vaccine freedom movement. And Hesu, we're going to start with you because in the last year, you've really positioned yourself to be, as I mentioned before we got in there, sort of a force of nature here in terms of getting an organic groundswell of support in our local communities, both in Ventura and in Santa Barbara, for this vaccine freedom movement. So the question I had for you is that I want you to tell us a little bit about how this came about in both of the communities relating to these vaccine issues and bills, etc.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. You know, I've been studying this issue for about 20 years, since my son was in the womb, and I wanted to make an informed decision when it came to vaccinating or not vaccinating him. So this issue has just come to the forefront so much in the last year or so. And
well, let me ask you a quick question. Before your son was born, were you a chiropractor 20 years ago? All right, so you've been a chiropractor for long enough time to sort of understand the holistic aspects.
Yeah.
So you made an informed decision back then probably not to vaccinate?
Correct.
And 20 years ago, it probably wasn't as big a deal as it was 5 years ago.
No, I just went to the school, they gave me a form, I signed it, they said, okay.
Okay, so that was it. But when I met you almost a year ago, but you've been very active in getting small groups together here in Santa Barbara and in Goleta. What's the purpose of getting these groups together?
Well, we're dealing with a very serious censorship issue right now with the vaccine issue. It's unlike anything I've seen in my lifetime, any other issue. Essentially, the media is only telling half the story. The media is controlled by the pharmaceutical companies because they get most of their advertising revenue from them. So what we're trying to do with these meetings is give people the missing information, the information that the public is not getting. Mm-hmm. And we're very grateful because we have a reporter here in town who's sympathetic to us and has written a couple articles in the past month to try to help us get our message out to the public.
No, and I think it's great because for the past probably 8 or 10 years, I have read reporters all over the United States, by the way. I mean, I'll take a vacation to see my family in Michigan, and I'll read in one of the local papers exactly the same thing that I've read in the LA Times or other places, and I'll write to the newspaper, and of course they won't even print it. Yeah. Basically calling me, the crackpot, or if they even answer it. But most of the time, it doesn't go in. So, but you're gathering people. You're trying to give them the other side of the story, but you're also trying to get some information out to as many media type outlets as you can.
Yeah, we're trying to, be as effective with our time and our energy. We're trying to get to the local politicians, the school board, even the police, because with these mandates, the police are going to be the ones carrying out the orders to forcibly vaccinate people.
Right. Hopefully that's not going to happen.
If these laws pass, they're happening very quickly.
Yeah,
so.
It's very interesting, and it is on a national level. But one of the things that we spoke about when we met at a colleague's house with a couple other chiropractors was the whole issue about chiropractors sort of taking up the mantle of primary care. And I'm going to come to you, Crystal, that when we had our interview a couple months back here at TV Santa Barbara, we actually spoke about the concept, and you already are primary care providers. I mean, I've known this for a long time. I know that I spoke with you, and I've been seeing chiropractors for over 40 years. So I understand that based on, I think it's the 1989 Supreme Court law, any of this other kind of stuff, that you are licensed primary care providers. So you can make certain, types of diagnoses, etc. But in terms of having chiropractors in pediatrics, you're already doing this as a chiropractor.
Historically, chiropractic has always treated children since the early beginnings of chiropractic, not really talked about too much.
100 years ago.
100 years ago, yes. And I think we're moving towards more integration in healthcare. I think that's where, it would be amazing if someday chiropractic people would come to their chiropractor first and then go to their medical doctors if their chiropractor referred them there, or a full integrated healthcare practice where they can walk in and have options to all of their medical practitioners and alternative practitioners, and have the freedom to choose fully informed without risking their family.
Right, and I actually look to see where parents could take their children into chiropractors first. I mean, we chose not to vaccinate many, my daughter's 26, my son is 22. So we chose many years ago not to vaccinate. And we know a lot of chiropractors in Santa Barbara. We never said, oh, that needs to be our primary health care. And we had some issues with we actually fired one of our pediatricians. Don't get me started, but I'm just saying that as you guys move through the mantle, it's like, how can we actually get to parents when they're pregnant that we can say, hey, we're here. We can be your primary provider. Correct?
Correct, yeah. Educating our cultural authority, I think, needs to improve the chiropractic. When you see any commercial or you hear anything, they always say, here's the treatment, but make sure you talk to your medical doctor to see if it's safe.
Right. Talk to your doctor
and
first.
That's the cultural authority that they have that we're missing. And so I think we need to get to that level, and then people will come to us first and say, okay, well, I trust what you say just as much as I trust this medical doctor.
Yeah. Well, and I know that, Hesu basically said that you're only getting one side of the argument, and he's absolutely correct. Is that, when I used to watch morning news, it was all pharmaceuticals. And it was very frustrating because, they all have to legally say what the side effects are, and it was just, it's why anyone would want to take these things. And it is very frustrating from being in your position, you guys. Hey, if we only had more money or something, we could advertise on these shows as well. But coming back to you, you're going about it. You've been to some protests here lately. I mean, you've been up to Sacramento. You've tried to talk with people about really stifling these bills that have come through in the last couple of years. Are we making any progress with, and I call a spade, these democratic legislatures who I really believe are hell-bent on ramming all of this stuff through, and in my opinion, it's pharmaceutically driven. So how are you dealing this with your, I'm not gonna say protest, but your lobbying efforts up in Sacramento? Because you've been there, what, 2 or 3 times now?
I was there twice, last April. There are philosophical differences between holistic health and medical health. And so we're just really fighting for our ability to choose how we raise our children, and how we keep them healthy, how we get them healthy, how we keep them healthy. And so there was a groundswell of support for trying to fight these bills. We had thousands of people up in Sacramento going into the senators and assembly members' offices. And we actually did get some of the Democratic Assembly members to abstain because they needed a certain amount of votes. They didn't want to go against their colleagues, so at least they abstained. So we were actually very close to getting the bill to not pass.
And this is Senate Bill 276, which just came up just a few months ago. So that's interesting. See, I did not know that there were, I figured they were all rats, So, so that's good news. So maybe we can get more of them. Maybe that's a political move that we should make. Hey, you don't have to vote against your colleagues; just abstain.
Well, our local assembly member is Monique Limon, and her term comes up in 2020, and she's going to run for state senate. And we have someone in our group that's going to run against her. So
Okay.
Really, we're looking at finding people who understand this issue deeply and just replacing those that totally refuse to open their minds.
Yeah, and I think that it is fast come to the forefront as being one of the critical local, state, and national issues. And like I say, 10 years ago, it wasn't on anybody's radar. Okay, so anything else?
I mean, people just don't understand how important this issue is.
I think they,
they don't realize the
That's-
toxicity that's involved in
yeah, and just,
the decline in health that we're seeing right now.
and you have a go ahead.
This is the new civil rights movement. This is the, if you're going to be pro-choice, you need to be pro-choice on everything.
Right.
Because no matter what you're doing to your woman's body, to a man's body, to a child's body, this is coming for everybody.
Right.
It's not just for kids. They're looking at they want everybody. And it's the next civil rights movement. 10 years ago, if you talked about the LGBT movement, people gave you the same kind of looks and resistance, and they didn't want to talk to you, and this is absurd. And now it's a conversation that we can have.
And it's interesting you say that, because 5, 6, 7 years ago, when they had the gay marriage bill in California, everyone's like, this is California, this is going to pass.
Yeah.
And it didn't pass.
Yeah.
I mean, it passed in like Minnesota, which is a lot more conservative state. And I'm like, how does this happen? And it's the same thing here. One would think that, well, being more of a liberal state and looking out for people's rights, but clearly we're seeing that this is not the way that the legislative bodies work here. So my next question to you is, I want you to sort of define the difference between a chiropractor and a pediatrics person. What do you do that you think is different, and what I would consider to be better than what a pediatrician is doing right now?
Luckily, I get the opportunity to learn all about the baby, the mother, their home life. I get to have these conversations with my patients and form a relationship. All of the things that they pretty much lack in the allopathic realm. They go see their pediatrician, they get a vaccine, they get weighed and measured, and that's it. I get to hear and talk to them about their teething issues, about how chiropractic can affect the nervous system of this baby for its entire life. We talk about breast milk versus formula, all of the different
Are you a
things.
supplement person when needed?
When needed, or in general. Again, we talked about last time the lack of nutrition and food.
Yeah, big issue with everybody.
And we have to look at the whole picture, because you're not just a part, you're not just an arm or leg, like you're a whole being with a life force that needs to be worked with. And so that I get the opportunity to see that. I get to see kids grow and change and throughout their whole life. So we get to step up and be a real family doctor.
Right, and you're second generation family medical office in Goleta, so I would imagine people knew you before you opened your practice. So.
I think I've treated one of my dad's patients, but it was my paradigm growing up.
Yeah, exactly. I remember in our last episode how you got adjusted when you were very little. I mean, that was sort of your first. You thought that pediatricians were like, who are those guys?
I didn't know who they are. As my kids only know it to go get, weighed and measured.
And I know that you're but you're also a doctor of chiropractic as well. Do you treat a certain amount of children in your practice as well?
I see maybe 10%, yeah.
Okay, about 10%. I know that you have more of the family, and I think that, and every chiropractor specializes in different things, as medical doctors do. You've got sports medicine, pediatrics, osteopath, you probably have a couple specialties as well. But most chiropractors, and I find it really fascinating with children, because when I do research for this show, and I did some research for yours, and I watched a YouTube video. This baby was like days old. It's like 30 days old, and they're doing just this little. It's like this. It's almost like a professional violin player. It was just the amount of tactiles. I mean, you can't make a mistake. I mean, you can't not with an adult. You just can't do that. So you have this amazingly, very delicate thing. Yeah. And it was just like, oh my gosh. And I'm watching some of this, and I'm like, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
And another thing that I think is very interesting for both of you, and I'm going to come back to your question in a little bit, is this is my viewpoint as a non-chiropractor looking at your profession versus medical doctors. There are thousands of chiropractors who put themselves out on YouTube and show you, the audience, how they do their adjustments. And I think that that's pretty bold because it could go awry, but almost always it doesn't. And there's some pretty aggressive guys on there with athletes. I mean, and I'm thinking, you don't really see a lot of doctors. This is how you do an injection. They just don't do that. It's a private, they don't want people to kind of know what they do. And coming back to you and your sort of activism, I think in some ways the jig is up. I think that the internet has opened this Pandora's box, and now you're saying, oh, they're trying to close it. But the information's out there. You're going to have to be a little sneakier about it. So let me ask you, in terms of the vaccine issue, there's this groundswell of emotion between what I call the pro-vaccine person and the vaccine freedom person. And they think everyone should get vaccinated, which I think is this crazy notion. But you've been more in tune with the efforts of Robert Kennedy, Del Bigtree, and some of those other people. What are you starting to see from their camp in terms of how they're addressing this latest round of censorship?
They're just taking it to the street. Well, this weekend, Robert Kennedy was in Harlem at a church. Mm-hmm. They shut him down at his first location. They had to move locations, and they only announced the location the night before because there's such efforts to shut him down. Mm-hmm. Senator Schiff, he wrote letters to Google, to Amazon, to Facebook, trying to stop any spread of information, telling Amazon not to sell any of our books. I mean, it's a modern day book burning.
It's a witch hunt.
It's a witch hunt.
It's crazy. And
they are terrified of debate. They don't want any discussion, and they're trying to control the narrative. Because if you listen to Robert Kennedy or Del Bigtree for a half hour, your mind will be opened up. They speak so powerfully. They have such integrity. You can smell it. You can hear it when they speak.
I got to tell you, this is a good point. Bobby Kennedy's a little hard to listen to over time because of his voice thing, which he admits to. But Bigtree, Del Bigtree, it flows out of him like he's singing an opera. I mean, you're absolutely right. He's got his points. He's got his narrative. He is very respectful of the other side. Mm-hmm. Something we can't say for pro-vaccine people. Yeah. And so I find it very interesting. So and Bigtree is he says our message is getting out there.
When you hear truth, you know it. I mean, it's hard to avoid. When you see someone who's telling you the truth, there's just an authenticity to the way he delivers it. And when you see somebody like Stanley Plotkin, he's like an old man like this, you just see the deception.
And I did not watch all of his testimony.
9 hours.
In 9 hours. I saw maybe an hour and a half of it, but you know what? That's all I needed because he suffered from foot-in-mouth disease from about the first 5 minutes. They would ask him the question, well, yeah, I guess. I mean, like with the whole thing about aborted, oh no, there's not. Well, there could be.
Maybe a few.
I'm like, well, you're the expert. You're the world's leading expert. And you don't know? Oh, that guy, he crucified him.
You can see corruption.
Yeah, you can see when you're corrupt and you get pinpointed in a court of law and you got nowhere to wiggle, which is exactly what he did. He had no wiggle room. That's a very compelling. And I would say to our audience, I think that if you want to see the world's leading authority crumble under pressure, go to YouTube and watch Stanley Plotkin, Dr. Stanley Plotkin's 9 hours of however much you can stand, but it's riveting stuff if that's what you're looking for because he essentially crucified himself. Very interesting.
So we have Vax 2 coming out on November 6th. We're trying to get a location in Santa Barbara that will show it.
And we're going to talk about that at the end, so I'm going to hold you a little bit because I want to come back with our last 10 minutes. I want to get our 1, 2, 3 more questions in here. So we know that there's corruption in medicine. I mean, it's becoming with this opioid crisis, and I told you before we went on air, they're settling out of court. Oh my gosh. And it's just, it's almost beyond logic on how this works. So is this getting you all fired up to become an advocate yourself, like Hesu? You're going to sort of, or do you just advocate to your people?
I advocate mostly to my patients
But do you
doing
see yourself?
this.
Do you see yourself? I mean, this is fantastic, and I'm very happy that both of you are here. But do you see yourself like writing a series of articles for the newspapers? At some point?
I have never thought
help.
about.
I'll help you.
I haven't thought about it, but I'm not opposed to it. I think the more information that goes out from different sources.
And
the
this is
easier
my
it is.
point. I mean, I've written, I cannot tell you how many letters to the editors. I mean, 20 years. I have letters to the editor in 1994 to the news press. But I think it's much stronger if it comes from Dr. So-and-so, because you could say, listen, in our practice, this is the way we do things. And I think that you guys would have a little bit, it actually might even get in. You know what I mean? So you are an advocate, and we're going to help you out on that. So Hesu, we talked about this before we went on air. You have an angry parent, and they're all in your face. You're not vaccinating your children, and this is just wrong. And your doctor, what do you say to them? I mean, you're a doctor too.
Yep.
So I'm an angry parent, and I'm why in the hell didn't you vaccinate your?
Yep.
So what would you say?
I mean, first you have to say, my whole life is committed to health.
Right.
So if you could just let down your guard for a second and hear, because we're on the same side. We want healthy children.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's some misconceptions that have been, and it's not your fault. The media has intentionally misinformed you.
Thank you.
So let me just give you some information that the media hasn't given you. They've deprived you of the truth. So can you just let down your guard for a second?
Okay.
So if I can get their guard down, right? Because you can't force people to listen.
It is very hard
Right.
to talk with people on, yeah.
So once you've got them, say, okay, I'll take a breath and listen. All right, 98% of all the infectious disease deaths were already, infectious, let me put it another way, infectious disease rates were down 98% before the vaccines came along.
Right.
They were already going down.
From the turn of the century to like 1960, you're right, about 98%.
Because of water treatment, sewage treatment, water chlorination improvements in
and
nutrition.
all of these types of things, yeah.
Hand washing, all those things. We became a more sanitary society. And things that there weren't vaccines for, like scarlet fever, those went down too. So
Which is a pretty good control subject.
Yeah.
No, scarlet fever, there's two communicable diseases that actually went down to zero without the advocate of having a vaccine. So that's
So first thing I want them to realize is vaccines didn't get rid of, if we didn't have vaccines, we wouldn't be in the state of the plagues anymore. Those things were wiped out already because of sanitation. The second thing they need to realize that the vaccines are the only industry out there that have no liability. They came to Congress in 1986 and said, we're getting hammered because of the DTP shot. We're losing money. Unless you release us from liability, we're not going to make vaccines anymore. So Congress said, okay, we'll release you of all liability. If a vaccine kills someone, they will have to sue us, the federal government, from this point forward. So the vaccine makers, same people that are, causing this opioid epidemic.
right, and most people don't know that.
Yeah, the pharmaceutical companies are making vaccines.
Right, but they don't really understand that the vaccine companies don't really have liability.
No liability, so they have no reason to make them safe. 'cause
Right.
they
I
have no
remember
money.
actually watching on Fox News, and one of the guys said this, and the lady who was the MC, who herself is the lawyer, I can't remember her name, she said, wait a minute, can we stop here?
No liability.
She had no idea. As a lawyer, she
Yeah.
goes, they don't have any liability. She was stunned to hear that, because
Yeah.
there's no manufacturing company in the United States that does not have a product liability. So anyway.
It was pay dirt for them because
Yeah,
they didn't
yeah.
have to deal with lawsuits or
Right.
anything like that. Now the third thing I would tell that parent is this whole 95% herd immunity thing is a joke, because real immunity, when you actually get an infection, you're immune for life. You have antibodies that if you're a woman, you pass those on to your baby, your infant, so your infant is protected by your antibodies if you get natural infection. Vaccine immunity is it's like the Pinto of immunity. Okay, so like take whooping cough.
I used to drive a Pinto, so careful where you tread.
Those things blow up, right?
All right, let's go.
So after 1 year, the whooping cough vaccine is only 70% effective. After 4 years, it's only 40% effective.
Right.
Okay, measles antibodies, they decline by 10% per year after the second dose. So all these adults, we're not immune to measles. The adults aren't immune. the mothers who've been vaccinated but haven't gotten measles, they're not passing antibodies on to their infants, so
Right.
those infants are vulnerable. So,
Well, and I know I'm a little older than both of you, but I can count on one hand the amount of vaccines that I had in my lifetime.
they've skyrocketed. It went from like 24 in 1986 to now it's 72 that are mandated.
Right, and when I was, I'm going to say school age, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, I think I've had, and I know my mom gave me at one time a, my immunization record that, they used to write in. I think I've had 9 my whole life.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had anything since I was like 10 years
Well,
old.
the point is that
So-
us adults aren't immune. We're not immunized. Just because we got a vaccine, we're not immune. We're not immunized.
Right, but the interesting thing is, and we've got a little less than 3 minutes to go, so I've got one more question for you. But it's interesting that as adults, almost all adults are anti-vaxxers because they have not been vaccinated for, in some cases, decades.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting. So my last question to you is, as an advocate standpoint, you advocate, and you have a number of, you have Hispanic group, you have different, different socioeconomic groups that come into you. I mean, you've got working class people, you've got some folks maybe who are business owners and CEOs. You have a large swath of the Goleta Valley, which is, there's a lot of different kinds of people that are there. How do you actually advocate for, if someone says to you about vaccines, what would you say? As a doctor, I don't because...
Oh, I have lots of information in my office. I mostly hand them, refer them to reading a vaccine insert. This is information given by the drug company itself, which they never ever see, and taking that to their doctor when they have another meeting. Like, let's go over this. How about we go line by line and see if this is worth the risk? Mostly just being a safe place for people to come, because most parents never have heard any of this information. I have a lot of vaccine injured patients, and their parents come and they say, what can I do?
Yeah.
How can you help? Where are we at with all the politics? How, what do I need to do to keep my kids in school? We have the petitions in our office. We have availability, the information for people to know what's going on and choose their rights and hopefully fight for their rights.
As a primary care doctor, you guys can't write exemptions, can you?
No.
Okay, that's all right. I thought I'd kind of slide it in there. So you mentioned, Hesu, that Vax 2 is coming out, and I think that Vax 1, the original Vax, and we've got just a little bit less than a minute, had a huge impact on this country. I'm driving in northern Michigan one day, and I stop at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. I mean, literally, this town was 73 people. And in the gas station, they had a poster to go see Vax. And I actually called one of our, I said, you're not going to believe this. So Dr. Hesu Witten, I mean, you are an advocate extraordinaire, and I know you're going to be doing some great stuff. And Crystal Galavan from Crystal Chiropractic and the Witten Method. Now, your stuff's been playing here. I appreciate both of your times, and we should probably be doing this as a series. I just want to make sure that we can get this information out, because I see that there is a real precipice. So on behalf of Med Health Fit and Dr. Hesu Witten from the Witten Method and Crystal Galavan from Crystal Chiropractic, this is Eric Durack for Med Health Fit. Thanks for watching this special edition of Med Health Fit.